Juliana, if you want to start recording, there we go.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone. This week we have a good friend and UTM grad and master student now, Rhys. So I'll let him take it away.
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Rhys. So who am I? I did my undergrad at UTM, and I'm currently doing my master's at UTM. I'm in my second year of my master's. I'm hoping to finish this year. And so a bit more about myself. I did a specialist in earth science. I did a minor in physics, and I did a minor in GIS. So for this talk, I'm going to just kind of exhibit some research I've done. I did a thesis project, and I'm currently doing my master's project. I'm going to kind of outline and talk about what I'm doing for these projects and kind of what kind of led me to these projects in terms of like what kind of courses I took that brought me here, what kind of courses I wish I took, and maybe some other opportunities I nabbed along the way. So my undergraduate thesis project, this is kind of the title I gave it. This is it's called the creation and excavation of the Dopal Basin in Western Nepal. So wait, do I have hold on. Okay, I do. Okay. So this project I did with Lindsay Schoenbaum, who's currently I think she's the head of the CPS department right now. Yeah, yep. She's doing well. I worked on this project during the third year of my undergrad, and it started as a research opportunity project. So an ROP. ROPs are fantastic. I was lucky to be recommended one from a upper year student when I was in second year. I decided to go with it, and I sent out 2 applications, and I ended up getting this one. And so I took it in a heartbeat. It was exciting. The project was originally titled, I can't remember where it started, but it was something like the project was supposed to be trying to find the link between glaciation in a region in Nepal and its geology. So I was trying to find the coupling between geology and glaciation. So those things are those things are kind of disconnected by a couple levels of science. So like from the geology comes the geomorphology, and then from the geomorphology comes the glaciology. So I was trying to put together that story for this region. So kind of talking about some skills I used the skills I learned in hydrology. So specifically, I was looking at a geomorphic basin for this research project, which is something that I learned in 212, which is hydrology. I was looking a bit at structural geology as well, because I was looking at geological maps for this basin and kind of connecting the geomorphology of the basin to the structural geology of the basin. I was doing the entirety of the project on ArcMap. So I was mapping out these glaciers in this basin using ArcMap. And I must say that process taught me quite a lot about ArcMap. And I actually had to take, my minor in GIS started because of this project. I originally had no intention of doing GIS, but after taking a couple classes to get me ready for the ROP, I decided to kind of stick with it because I thought it was pretty fun. I did a lot of programming as well during my physics minor. Physics was a bit tedious, but it was fun. Specifically in my second year physics courses, for example, like vibrations and waves, fluid mechanics. I can't remember the other one. But all of these ones we were using MATLAB, which is what I used to process my data once I had it all. And I'll kind of give you an idea of what my data was in a bit. So how I'm going to present my research, I'm just going to show you the figures I made for the project. Actually, sorry, I forgot one last thing. So this project started off as an ROP. And then after a year, because ROPs last for either half a year or a full year, mine was a full year. So after that full year, Lindsay asked me if I wanted to pursue the project further as a USRA. So the USRA is the Undergraduate Student Research Award. It's given out by NSERC, and NSERC is the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, I think. Essentially, they're the department that's responsible for funding research in Canada. And they do have a bit of money aside for undergraduate students. And so I was pretty lucky to get one of these. There's only 6 in, they only offer 6 for the entirety of CPS. So I was very happy to get one that year. It's mostly the chemistry students that take them, but it's always nice when an earth science student gets one. So kind of going into the project now. So this is the Dopal Basin. This is kind of the basin that I was most interested in, and it's kind of here in Nepal, right over there. It's right on the border between China and Nepal, and it's separated by a major drainage divide. So everything north of this basin is the Yarlung River Basin that drains most of southern Tibet. And yeah, up here as well is the Tibetan Plateau. Down here is the Himalayas. Down here, though, is the Karnali River Basin, which drains most of western Nepal. So kind of this area here, or kind of here. I'm not using a tablet, I'm just using my mouse. Just get rid of those. So something you'll notice about this basin, I've taken the liberty of mapping out all the glaciers I could. So you'll notice that there are a lot of glaciers on the northern border, and especially these glaciers are pretty large. There's none over here, which I thought was very interesting. I'll get into that later, just to kind of set the stage. There's only small glaciers on the eastern border. There's a lot over here, but none over here. And there's only a few over here. So I mapped out glaciers, not to get an idea of how they're changing through time. I wasn't interested in their mass balance per se, but I wanted to get like a snapshot view of their distribution through time. So after I mapped out these, I think 500 glaciers, for each glacier, I extracted their size, their length, their highest elevation point, medial elevation, lowest elevation, the peak point, so like the elevation highest, the elevation that is highest to the glacier, but like neighboring it and not on it exactly, and a bunch of these glacial parameters. And I ended up doing a lot of like correlation analyses on MATLAB. I don't have any of those plots on this slide because they're kind of drab, but that's just kind of how I process the data after drawing these outlines on ArcMap. So here's a geological map of the basin. So this basin, the first thing I want to point out is that the northern border, kind of this guy up here, is kind of mostly composed of a band of antiformal leucogranites. So these are igneous rocks, and they are antiformal. So that means they form an anticline, kind of along this line I drew over here. And so that's interesting for later when I show you guys my basin evolution diagram. Another thing that's interesting is that you have quite a lot of these TSS sediments. So the yellow ones, these guys, these are meta-sedimentary units. And these are sedimentary units. So TSS stands for the Tethyan Sedimentary Sequence. So hopefully you are all familiar with the fact that long ago, India was its own continental mass, and the Indian plate collided with the Eurasian plate to create the modern Himalayas. Because continent-continent collisions create such high mountain ranges, that's why the Himalayas is the highest mountain range on the world right now. Because it's the only instance really today where there is active continent-continent collision going on. But while India was colliding with the Eurasian plate, so you can imagine like this is the Eurasian plate, this is India. There used to be an ocean, a sea right between the two, and this was called the Tethys Sea. The Tethys Sea got abducted onto the land and actually got preserved. This is one of the few cases where you actually preserve oceanic crust as well, if you're keen on that. And so a lot of the sedimentary units in that ocean actually got preserved onto the Tibetan Plateau. And that's kind of what we're seeing over here. All of this is ancient oceanic sediments. The purple units, though, these are, I think these are the Greater Himalayan sequence. These are metamorphic rocks. And these down here, these are lightly metamorphic rocks. These are lesser Himalayan sequences. And if you are keen in this, you'll notice that why are the higher metamorphic rocks on top of the lower metamorphic rocks? And I don't quite have the answer to that. A lot of people talk about the fact that the metamorphic grade is reversed in the Himalayas. It's not a very important topic for this project in particular, but it is something that is interesting about this region. So if you look at the distribution of glaciers, you'll notice that many of the glaciers rest upon these igneous and metamorphic units. So like you have glaciers on the GHS, glaciers on the metaseds and the leucogranites. You also have glaciers just very distributed over here, where it kind of abruptly stops here. There's none here. And you'll notice that there's an absence of glaciers on these sedimentary rocks. And almost notably so, there's a small island of leucogranites where there are a couple glaciers kind of huddled together. It seems like they very much avoid this rock type, probably because this rock type is easily eroded because it's a sedimentary rock. So glaciers that may have once existed on here have already eroded their head walls away and have dropped the landscape to an area that's below the ELA. And regions below the ELA, actually I should explain what the ELA is. The ELA is an elevation where you have to be higher than this elevation to actually accumulate ice. And once you're below this elevation, you do not accumulate ice. So because these are sedimentary rocks, you could assume that the ELA here is probably lower because they have probably eroded down. That's probably not the best explanation, but it's not too relevant for what I'm trying to get at right now. So this plot over here, this is a slope map, and it's actually been rounded down. So it's not a perfect slope map. It's a slope map with a 4-kilometer focal mean. So what it means that it takes for every dot on the map, it takes a circle. Hold on, let me do this better. For every pixel on this map that I have, it draws a circle around it and takes the average for that pixel. And then that's what becomes the value for that pixel. So then for the next pixel, it does that again. For the next pixel, it does that again. And what that does, it creates kind of this smoothing effect. So that's why this is kind of pleasant to look at, rather than it being so jagged and kind of steep. So that's a bit of context for this map. To kind of explain what the slope map is showing, the blue regions are regions of low slope. These are areas that are not too steep, they're kind of shallow. And as we could expect, the Tibetan Plateau, which is a relatively flat region of the world, because it is a plateau, has low slope. Whereas the Himalayas, which have been uplifted, and areas that have been uplifted are usually jagged. These regions here, these are very steep, and which is what we expect from a mountain range. Something interesting though, something I want to kind of point your attention to, is this. So look at this in terms of the basin. This is the Dopal Basin right here. Look how the slope is kind of divided into kind of two sections. On this side of the basin over here, the slope is very high. So you have all of this very high slope region over here. And it's especially high in the basin outlets. So if I were to draw the rivers of the basin kind of look like this, I think, like this. So and they flow outwards this way, kind of that way. So we'll notice that the mouth of the basin is much more incised than kind of the further outer edges of the basin. And this was actually something I wanted to explore when I did my USRA, because once I finished my ROP, I had my glacier data, but I hadn't done my geomorphological analyses yet, which is something that I really wanted to do. And so I looked at the Rhys, I looked at what's the word? On articles about this basin, of which there are not many, mind you, because it's not a very interesting basin. Most people look at actually, let me jump back for a second. Most people look at Mount Everest, which is over here near Kathmandu. There aren't too many research papers about Western Nepal. They're kind of, that as an aside. I managed to find a paper that talked about this effect right over here. And they said that this effect was likely due to uplift in the region. Now, it is true that uplift would cause very high steepness values because it's the incision of a once flat region by rivers. But I looked at other papers that kind of showed off uplift, quantification of uplift in the region, and uplift in the Dolpo Basin is virtually zero. And that I thought was very interesting. So I kind of put together my own hypothesis why this was like this and this was like this. So I'm just kind of teasing it out right now. I'm going to show you guys one more thing before I kind of tell you what my hypothesis was. So this is okay, how to explain this? Oh, sorry, yes. This is an elevation profile of the Dolpo Basin's kind of, sorry, where is it? Drainage divides, that's right. So I have a elevation profile of the, oops, I didn't mean to move that. Where's my draw? There we go. So I have the elevation profile for the northern border, elevation profile for the southern border, and elevation profile for the eastern border. So something I noticed from these elevation profiles was in the northern border, there is a significant wind gap. So a wind gap is either a glacial valley or a fluvial valley on a drainage divide, or you could call it an arête. So kind of like a division, a line of divisional topography. And why this is weird is because we know that glaciers and rivers do not flow uphill. And if I were to kind of draw this region over here, this wind gap actually correlates to right here. If I were to kind of draw this region right here, if I was looking at it from the side, so this is kind of like the eye looking at it from the side, it would look like this. So this is what it should look like. This is this is Tibet, and then this is the Himalayas. Instead, it kind of looks like this. Okay, I'm going to try to draw this 3D. Okay, so it looks like this, but there's a valley right here. So imagine that this is a 3D drawing. So there's like rivers going down here, rivers going down here. But there's a weird river valley right here. And there's no river that flows through it because it's on a ridge line. So that means there was once a river that flowed through here, which is very strange because the Tibetan Plateau is such an area of high relief, or sorry, low relief, and this is such an area of high relief. It would be strange that there would be such a, to have any transfer of like glaciers between the two, because there's such a crazy divide between the two. Let me start getting rid of these notes. And so with that wind gap identified and the, let me get rid of that arrow, that's fine. With that wind gap identified and the high slope mouth of the basin, I kind of put together a story for myself. So I hypothesized that originally the basin used to be part of the Tibetan Plateau in a geomorphological sense. So I hypothesized that this basin its rivers used to flow through that mouth over here, that weird wind gap, onto the Tibetan Plateau. But eventually this basin was pirated by the Karnali River Basin. So the blue lines are how the rivers work in modern time. You'll see that the basin drains out this way, and then this river drains down here and it comes out. So if it was pirated, it would have originally have drained up here and gone up here. So this was kind of the main topic of my thesis. I wanted to kind of provide evidence to justify perhaps this large geomorphological change happened in the first place. And it was actually a very fun project to work on. Everything up to now was kind of context. So I produced this figure to kind of explain it. I had to teach myself how to use Illustrator to make this thing. This was a ton of fun to put together. So I believe that originally, so this area right here is the Doppel Basin, but originally there was no ridgeline back here. At some point, this leucogranitic bed, which forms the kind of the northern ridge of the Doppel Basin, was uplifted up. And so the Doppel Basin was created. But for some time, the Doppel Basin still flowed northwards onto the Tibetan Plateau. After some time, though, the basin was pirated by the Karnali River Basin, and so flow shifted to the south. So this is the story of drainage capture. And so, because it was captured towards the south now, and now because the Yarlung River Basin has such a high base level, and the Karnali River has such a low base level, actually, I should explain what base level is. So the rivers of the Yarlung River Basin, this is kind of what they look like if you follow them downstream. They kind of reach this, they're not very steep. Their base level is shallow, and rivers always erode down to their base level. But if their base level is not very low, then rivers will not really care too much about eroding down, because they can't never be lower than their base level. Because if a river goes below its base level, then suddenly it's flowing uphill, and that doesn't make sense. So rivers will never dig down deeper than their base level. But when this basin was captured by the Karnali River Basin, its base level dropped. So the base level of the Karnali River is way down here rather than up here. So rivers actually look like that rather than this. So because that happened, the rivers of the Doppel Basin originally looked like this, but then they were captured into a basin that looks like that. So the rivers started to work their way at this nick point, and that's the official word for it, and they worked their way down because they're trying to create this perfect river shape to the base level. And that's what happened. So in this modern basin, you have this wave of incision into the basin as the basin adjusts to its new base level. It wants to get to that Karnali River Basin level, and it wants to forget that it was ever associated with the Yarlung River Basin level. And because incision takes a while, it's like a bit of a wave. So the incision in modern time has only reached half of the basin, which is why, and if I'm going to open up the slope map, which is why the incision, it's only made it this far. The incision is still working its way through here. The incision's job is to make everything in accordance with the baseline. And if you were to probably do a river analysis on this river right here, you'd probably find your nick point somewhere around over here. So this is kind of like the progress of the erosion, but it still kind of has to go this way, and there's a river that goes that way. So this region here is a relict of the Tibetan Plateau. This implies that the Tibetan Plateau once extended roughly 40 kilometers south of where it is today. And there's actually other papers that suggest that as well. There's papers that look at like the geochemistry of rocks in this region and kind of map it to the rocks over here. And plus geologically, I mean, these rocks here are typically Tibetan rocks as well. It doesn't explain why they're out of the Doppel Basin, but it's kind of one part of the picture. And so now with that aside, I still wanted to link everything to glaciers. And now there was one last thing to look at, the precipitation map. So this is the precipitation map of the basin. The pixels that are white represent high precipitation. The pixels that are black represent very low precipitation. So, like I was talking about, here I'm going to use a red for this. This is the basin of the border. So my hypothesis is that this basin used to be closed over here, and there was no mouth, and instead it went upwards right here. But something interesting you'll notice that it looks like the precipitation actually enters the basin from this mouth. right? You can see how kind of like the precipitation snakes in, and then you get this cloud of precipitation here, whereas you don't get anything here, you don't get anything here. So when the basin was pirated, it actually allowed for precipitation to enter the basin, which means, so this is kind of where it gets abstract. I hypothesize that if you are able to date these glaciers, you can date pretty closely when this basin opened up, because these glaciers wouldn't be here unless there was precipitation here. And we know that the precipitation is only here because it can enter from here, because there's nothing here, because it can't enter from here because there's an elevation wall over here. But there's an opening here because the basin was pirated. So if I were to ever continue this project, I'd probably want to do field work here, do some like water isotope analyses, date these glaciers, and find out if the basin actually did open up at one point. And so in my thesis, I talked about the null hypotheses. The null hypothesis is that this river basin has always been here. And I do my best to disprove this null hypothesis. Of course, I can never prove my hypotheses because that is the nature of science. But in my thesis paper, I work hard to disprove this guy. So that's kind of my undergrad project. I actually recently this year, I got it published, which was very nice for me. I worked very hard on it, and I was very happy to finally get it out there. So I'm going to talk about my master's project. So for those of you in earth science, this will be a total change of pace. This is more of a physical geography project, and it was very much a change of pace for me too. So the title of this project is Calibrating and Applying a Novel Proxy to the Eastern Beringia Subarctic. Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to kind of do it step by step. So a proxy is something that you could use to measure something else indirectly. So for paleoclimatologists, a proxy could be the width of tree rings on a tree. And that's actually what Trevor does. If you know Trevor, he does tree ring stuff. And so like the width of a tree ring. So if you know 50 years ago, if you count the rings back, and you see this one tree ring that has a lot of width, that was probably a pretty warm year where the tree could grow a lot. But if you see maybe further back, there's this very thin tree ring. That's probably a year where it was very small, not that much. And so that's how the proxy works. It's a phenomenon that we could use to infer conditions at that time. And so I'm looking at it's not tree rings, it's a bit more complicated. I'm looking at this bacterial lipid. So I'm looking at the branched chain glycerol diacylglycerol tetraethers, and they're called, we just call them branched chain GGGTs for short. It takes practice to say this really fast. So what's exciting about these guys is that they're pretty much brand new. They were only recently discovered in year 2000, but it took 7 years for people to actually determine that you could use them as a proxy for both relative humidity, so that's kind of like dampness and dryness of the air, and temperature. And so now there is an effort en masse globally, for those who are into this kind of thing, to calibrate this proxy. And so before I talk about the calibration process, I want to tell you how this proxy works. So how does this lipid tell you anything about temperature or humidity? And so I'm going to explain that. So what are branched chain GGGTs? So I took these slides from my my proposal, actually. So hopefully they still hold up. It's been a while since I looked at them. So branched chain GGGTs are produced by anaerobic, heterotrophic bacteria. So anaerobic means it doesn't need air. No, wait, anaerobic. That's right, yeah. So it lives in anoxic conditions where there is no oxygen. Heterotrophic means that it does not produce its own food. So it takes from its surroundings. And the branched chain GGTs are its membrane lipids. So in the sense that it's basically, if this is your bacteria, its membrane lipids are these guys. And so this is what we're looking at. And so how it works is that when this bacteria is cold, it will produce more of a certain form of this lipid because there are many different forms of this lipid. You don't really need to know all the forms. Like it varies about like the cyclopentanes. There's some extra carbon groups kind of on the side, extra methyl groups. But all you need to know is that when it's cold, it produces maybe some of these. When it's warm, maybe it produces some of these. When it's dry, maybe it produces some of these. When it's humid, maybe it produces some of these. So essentially, we can measure, once we get the concentrations of all of these guys kind of coming down through extensive lab work, which is what I'm doing right now, we can measure the relative abundances, so like the X over the total of that specific lipid, and then we could tell if it's warm or cold. And so I have a kind of a figure to demonstrate that. So I know this looks complicated. So let me try to explain this. So those forms, the 1A, 2A, 2A prime, are these guys that I showed before. And so if you take the relative abundances of them, you could form these indexes. So these indexes, because we don't use them as an individual, we use them as a formula that connects all of them. This index is based off of the relative abundances of these specific lipid forms. And so it's not these things in specific that correlate with temperature and humidity. It's these indexes, which are the collection of them. So CBT, which is calculated with this, is correlated with pH. And so this is soil pH. Cyclation ratio, hold on, CBT is over here. So when your CBT is higher, you have less pH. When it's lower, you have more pH. And it kind of correlates pretty well with a R-squared of 0.7, which is very promising. Additionally, you could use different forms to create the MBT5ME, which is the index that you can use to measure temperature. So MAT is mean annual air temperature. So it predicts air temperature. So we know that higher MBT would mean higher temperature, and then lower MBT would mean lower temperature. And that it actually correlates very well. Less well in recent papers. These are actually numbers from when it first came out. And I think they kind of buffed up these numbers a bit. In truth, it's more like 0.6-ish. But that's kind of besides the fact. These proxies still do work. The issue with these proxies, though, is that they must be calibrated. Calibration is basically getting this line over here, this formula, because although you have this, you need to calibrate it. And calibration is what is going on today. So today, a lot of these samples have been calibrated here, they've been calibrated here, but there's a bit of a bias in modern day calibration. Most of the calibration is happening at these kind of mid-northern latitudes and kind of up here. But there's no calibration being done in like subarctic regions, except for maybe this one point. So my goal is to calibrate this sample here. And so 2 years ago, or not this summer, but last summer, I went on a field trip to Yukon, and I collected soil samples, and I'm processing them now, and I'm going to create a local calibration for these branched-chain GGGTs in Yukon. So it's going to be very exciting. I'm going to be adding to the global calibration of this proxy. People will love my data, I'm certain. It'll be fun. So that's kind of all I want to show you for this project right now. I'm still working through the data, and I don't want to show you the lab methods I use because they're just kind of alien. They were alien to me at first as well. So from there, I'm going to say thank you for listening. While you guys think about any questions you may have for me, I'm going to show off some fun pictures from my Yukon trip because I think that'll be nice. So here's a nice panoramic. That's Gerard. This is Trevor's PhD student, and he's collecting lake sediments. So he's looking at stuff that I'm similar. He's looking at stuff similar to what I'm looking for. I'm looking at branch chain GGGTs in soils, he's looking at them in lake and river sediments. And they are slightly different. While I was there, I found a really cool fossil. I have no idea what it is. It almost looks like the root of a crinoid. I have no idea. It looks like a chicken foot, almost kind of like chicken-like. I have no idea what it is. If you know what it is, please let me know. I've been trying to ID this thing for a while. Additionally, we were at Dawson City, which is basically the gold rush city of, it's kind of like the Wild West of the Canadian subarctic. This is kind of where all the gold mining happens. It very much looks Wild Westy. It's very cool. While I was traveling, we went above the Arctic Circle. And so the Arctic Circle is the latitudinal point where you start getting 24-hour days and nights. So while we were doing field work, we were camping some nights, and the sun never really went away. So it's very difficult to sleep when you have 24-hour sunlight, which was fun. This over here, this is Tombstone National Park. If you ever have the chance to go to Tombstone, it's in central Yukon, and it's beautiful. This is actually right over there at the back. That's Tombstone. That's Mount Tombstone. And it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mountain ranges away. It takes you, I think, 2 days to make that walk to Tombstone. Even though you could see it so clearly right over there, it is very far away from here. And this is kind of like the observational place where everyone does sightseeing. So this is not a special picture by any means. Up north, we found a lot of cloudberries, which they taste very interesting. They look like raspberries. They're very bitter and tart. And they kind of, as soon as you pick them, they kind of like ooze and just kind of break. They don't preserve that well. They immediately rot, but they're very delicious if you eat them like fresh. I had fun with that. We actually, if you can't tell what this is a helicopter. We took a helicopter a couple locations, more so for Sam samples. This is Sam. He's another master student, and he collected some tree rings while I collected soils. So we collected 2 different stuff. Actually, going to this picture, on the way to central Yukon, we passed by a place that sold the self-proclaimed world's largest cinnamon bun. And there it is, world's largest, just in the middle of Yukon. It was kind of funny. That's a fun picture. Additionally, we took the van all the way from Whitehorse, which is at the bottom of, so imagine this is Yukon right over here. Whitehorse is over here. We took the van all the way up here to the coastline of the Arctic Ocean in Northwest Territories. And from there, I took a swim. I swam in the Arctic Ocean. It was very cold. I was only in there for like half a second, but it was great. Additionally, we went to a couple sites where active gold mining was going on, and it's messy, lots of mud. And we played foosball a bunch while we were up there, because we found, like, just out of pure coincidence, we found 4 different foosball tables while we were there. So I'm very good at foosball. So that kind of ends my thank you slide. Thank you everyone to listening. Are there any questions? Hope you guys all enjoyed that. I know that was a lot. I probably could have done it better. But.
I think we're really happy to hear about your research, happy that you presented. If you guys want to post some questions in the chat, or you can unmute your mic and ask Rhys personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Largest cinnamon bun, I want that scale. Okay, it was like 3 pounds, which is pretty heavy. So all 3 of us shared it and we couldn't finish it. Let's see. Where's the scale bar? Okay, hold on, buddy. Okay, do you know your paper was going to be published? So I kind of went into my ROP wanting to get published, kind of out of my own, that was a self-motivated goal. I didn't know if I would get it. And it took me, it took me 3 years. I was working on it way past the US array, way past the ROP. It was just a personal goal at that point. I had no obligations to work on it. Yes, you did find it. I had no obligations to work on this project, but I wanted to do it and get it published. And so I kind of just pushed through it and did it, and it was a lot of fun. And Lindsay was very happy to get another publication as well. So it was win-win for both of us. Was that the intention? It was for me, but it wasn't the intention of the project itself. Thank you, thank you. I guess another thing I could mention, oh God, this project over here, I wish I took a couple chemistry classes, dude. It's brutal. I know nothing. Everything I'm doing for this project, I have to like self-teach myself. Like I wish I took like analytical chemistry or like any sort of biology class, but I've never taken like really any chemistry or bio. And that's all this project is. So it's a lot of fun. It's kind of scary, but it's good. This is a question about ArcMap. Is it like AutoCAD? I don't know what AutoCAD is. ArcMap is, it's a mapping software where you could upload raster data sets. And so rasters are like gridded data sets, kind of where like each cell is like, this is one elevation, this is another elevation, or maps. Yeah. If I'll help you with the chemistry, if you help me with the GIS. Sure, if you have GIS questions, I could certainly help you. I was pretty good at it in my prime. I haven't used it in a while. What do you mean a lot of fun in quotes? Everything I showed you was a passion project, okay? How does the data get even collected? Are you talking about my glacier data or the soil data? Just because I did present 2 different projects. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. For rasters, okay. Are you? Okay, that's a loaded question. I don't think. Okay, so are you actually okay? So like, I create a blob on ArcGIS. So I create a polygon. Like, let's say this is a glacier. There's something called extract attributes, where you could have this glacier extract information from the raster it is sitting on. And from there, you could do numerics on that data. So from there, I calculated like the minimum elevation, the maximum elevation. There's a specific way to do it. I can't remember the specific name, but there is a way to extract raster data from polygons. And it made my project so much easier than doing it by hand. Sorry if I missed it when you said it. Your slope/DM were done. Yeah, so I downloaded a slope map. Sorry, no, I didn't download a slope map. I downloaded the Aster GDEM, which is the Aster Global DEM, which is like, it's a global elevation map of the world. I clipped it to my study area, and then I used the slope tool built into ArcMap to create a slope map. And then I used the focal tool in ArcMap to create my focal map. It's been a while since I've done that. So ArcMap has a lot of built-in tools for doing numerical analyses on DEMs. I basically did everything I could for this project, just looking for any trends. And so I found trends by doing this. It's very investigational science. Might have to take you up on that at some point. Yeah, send me an email. My email is just Rhys.Buceta. You could probably just search the directory and you could find me. So what I'm hearing is that sleepless nights and maybe some tears. Yeah, there was. I was there for a month. Of course, we stayed mostly at a small town called Inuvik, which is actually, let me draw my Yukon again. So this is Yukon. This is the Arctic Ocean. There's actually a town right here, and that's where we stayed for most of the trip. So imagine this is Whitehorse. This is Dawson City. That's Dawson City is this guy over here. And so we took the highway going up, and we made that pit stop going here. Also, this is Alaska, by the way, so Alaska looks like that. And so we spent most of our time here, but we did camp for a couple of nights, and it was tough. We spent 1 week traveling up, and it only took a week because we were collecting samples along the way, and 1 week coming back. And then while we were here, we spent 2 weeks up here collecting SAM samples. So we went into like swampland and like untamed wilderness with nothing but like a chainsaw and like bear spray, and we collected logs. So it was a great time. Very scary. How was the mud? I was only bad at the gold mines, really, because to mine gold, they take like a pump and like a nozzle and just spray sediments away. So actually, if you're interested in the geology of Yukon, it's mostly just windblown sediments. So this stuff, if you spray it with water, it just flushes away. And actually, this entire area here, like entirety of Dawson City, has been like flushed away by pumps for people looking for placer gold. And because there was once like, yeah, it's all sediments. It's all sediments. And there's probably a ton of gold flakes on my feet in this picture. I should have just taken a bag and collected the mud. Also, the guy who was giving us the tour of the gold mine, he let us go panning and I found gold. Of course, I couldn't keep it, but that's a fun story. Of the stuff I've done. Are there bears up there? Wouldn't you need someone to farm? We definitely should have had one. You are completely right. Trevor may have skimped out a bit on costs, but we had a can of bear spray and a chainsaw, so we were pretty okay. Polar bears, we didn't see any polar bears. It was all brown bears, I think. Yeah, brown bears, which are the scary ones. So it was kind of messed up. Yeah, grizzlies. It was mostly grizzly bears up there. Yep. Yeah, it was bad. We saw a couple, but only when we were driving. Thank God. I would have crapped my pants. I have 2 questions for you. What was your favorite part of any project you've worked on? And would you want to pursue a PhD after you finish your master's? Okay, so I'll give you 2 answers to those 2 questions. What is your favorite part of any project? Oh, that's a loaded question. I think my favorite part was putting this together. Honestly, this was the last figure I made for this project. And I only made it because when I submitted my paper, one of the reviewers said, "It's great, please make a cartoon." I'm like, okay, well, so I made a cartoon. Funny story about this cartoon. I finished this on Christmas Day, like last Christmas, because my free trial for Adobe Illustrator was running out and I had to finish it. So I pumped this out. It was great though. I'd say this is my favorite part, putting this all together. I think it looks great. Let me see. Also, am I planning on doing a PhD? That depends. I am tired of academia, to be frank. COVID has like taken out all the fun. I'm pretty drained. I need a break. So maybe, it's a strong maybe, depends on the project. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, any other questions or fun comments? If there's no more questions, I could call it there. I guess thank you for having me. Do you have any final words, Alessio?
Thank you for hosting this amazing talk. I think we all learned a lot about all your projects, kind of what you're up to, and kind of an alumni from UTM specifically. So
yeah,
thank you for having.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for having me. How many people showed up? I didn't actually check the size.
We got about 9 or 10.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming then. That's fun.
Thank you. Julian, if you want to stop recording.